What's up, guys? This is Mike Cazu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I'm back at LSU with Coach Tommy Moffitt and Eric Donoval. We talk all kinds of strength and conditioning, leadership, how to be a better strength and conditioning coach, and lots more. If you've been a regular listener of the show and haven't done so yet, please put this show on pause, head to iTunes, leave me a quick review. Hope you enjoy the show.
Mike the man, what's up, dude? This is Chris Krumholt from Sling and Iron CrossFit in your home state of Walker, Louisiana. I was recently impacted by the flood that we had a few months ago. I lost basically all of my mobility in my shoulders, some in my hips. My engine that I have now, I'm firing on all three cylinders of a V8, so I lost all stamina. What can I do to get that back as quick as possible? Some of my strength is still there, but I'm having problems with my mobility and, obviously, my endurance as far as getting my engine back. What can I do? I need some help. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Chris, what's up, brother? Thanks for calling in, man. So I've got three things for you. On the mobility side of things, the first thing is you need to figure out if it's actually a mobility issue and not a stability issue. The best resource I know for figuring that out is Active Life RX. That's what they do. They figure out what is restricting you from moving the way that you were born to move, and giving you programming to dial that in. So the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they just stretch, or they foam roll and spend a lot of time on the lacrosse ball, but they're really just spinning their wheels because they have some kind of imbalance or stability issue somewhere else in their body. So figure out if that's the case. And if you do find that it's a mobility issue, and namely a flexibility issue, then it's all about consistency, man. There's no way to rush, this whole mobility thing. So spend 30 to 60 minutes in the morning or at night, or a little bit of both, stretching not only the area that's tight, but the areas around the tissue around that, your problem areas, if you will. And then just commit yourself to the process. That's really the only way to go about the mobility thing. Okay, for the engine, the first is you want to protect. Again, you can't really. There's no way to rush it, but here's how to make sure you're not wasting time. There's this idea of protecting the intensity of your workout. So if you're trying to get back in conditioned shape as quickly as possible, then adding a ton of volume of conditioning is not necessarily the way to go. For the vast majority of people, unless you're a CrossFit Games athlete and you need to be really resilient for those 72 hours of competition, then you don't need to worry about doing a ton of workouts, right? You need to learn how to go really, really hard, one workout at a time. So protect the intensity of your workouts. Make sure when you're doing your Metcons that you're as fresh as possible. And if you're thinking about doing double days, triple days, really question yourself as to why you think that's beneficial. Most of the time, we'll find that people are just adding volume for the sake of adding volume, and it's taking away from the intensity of those Metcons. And really, the most potent stimulus you can give yourself, right? The biggest chance you can give yourself for improvement in this sport is to have as high intensity as possible during your workouts. The only thing that I would suggest adding, and this is because I think it's still very foreign to most people, is just slow aerobic work. So I'm talking about 30 minutes to 2 hours of work that puts you in a heart rate range of 130 to 150. That's a conversational pace, right? So if you're doing this exercise and you're not able to carry on a conversation with someone, a conversation is painful, right? Because you're breathing so hard, then you're going too fast. It's very, very boring work. And that's why I recommend people, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. I've learned a shitload while doing my cardio work. It's become like a really nice time just to decompress, invest in my learning, and also build my engine. And so specifically, most people are going to want to do low impact movement. So rowing, biking, using a skier, even swimming is okay. For most people, running is a little too a high impact. You can definitely throw in one session a week as you're low and slow, but most people are also not good enough runners to stay below a 150 heart rate. So throw that in 2 or 3 days a week, 30 minutes to 2 hours. And what this is doing, I look at the aerobic system like this. You can do a ton of Metcons, right? Think of your aerobic system as a bowl, and you can do a bunch of Metcons, right? You can do double days, triple days, and you can do this for years, and you can fill that bowl, right? And you're basically maxing out your VO2 max. A lot of research points to the fact that you basically reach your VO2 max potential in a year. One way to improve this and basically build a bigger engine is to build a bigger bowl. And the way you build a bigger bowl is through this slow aerobic work. So throw that in 2 or 3 days a week. When you're starting out, probably just start with 1 or 2 sessions of this a week. Again, make sure it's very low intensity and protect the intensity of your important workouts. Hope that helps, man. Hey guys, if you have a question that you want answered related to health and fitness, mindset, business, etc., please don't hesitate to call in. I absolutely love being able to connect with you guys and answer your questions, or having friends of mine that are experts help me answer your questions. So if you're interested, call into the hotline at 801-449-0503. That's 801-449-0503. What's up, everyone? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm back in southern Louisiana at the Tiger Den with the legend himself, Tommy Moffitt, and his assistant, Eric Donoval. Guys, I know y'all are incredibly busy. You've got groups going on right now, so thank you for carving out some time for me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. No problem.
So I want to start off, when I was with you guys, you really just kind of threw me into the mix, and over the course of many months, I learned your methodologies and whatnot, but I was never sat down at the beginning and shown like, this is what we do and the way we do it, and I really loved that approach. You threw me in the mix, and what I noticed was the attitude and the energy that y'all brought to it. So I'm wondering, is that a conscious thing that you've tried to instill here, or is it just a natural byproduct of the way that you are?
So this is a working internship. That's what you did.
Yep.
It's not a place where you come and you observe and you're shadowing someone. We want our coaches to coach. And I think if you're going to learn to coach, you have to coach. So that was one part of it. And I don't know if we did the in-service training with your group where we sat around a circle and we went through all the exercises.
Yeah, I think I had my surgery and I was recovering at that time.
So you missed the in-service training part of it. So we do that with everyone. So you missed the part where we said this is how we do it. But there is baptism by fire, because we don't want it to be a place where you come and observe.
Right. And I know both are very important, but if you had to weigh the two, what is more important, the methodologies and the sets and reps, or the intangibles, the attitude, the showing up every day, all of that part of coaching?
I think they're both equally important. We try to keep what we do here simple. There's not a lot of fancy stuff, I guess you could say. Coach Brad Roll told me, don't do so much that you don't ever get good at anything. So it's important that there's a lot of hard work, there's great attitude, great energy, but the methodology is important too. But we want our guys working hard, having fun, great intensity, loud music, and all that also.
Hell yeah. Tell me a little bit about your onboarding process when you get you get freshmen or people that are about to start school. What's your onboarding process like, and how do you get people excited about the culture? Other than obviously, you have this existing culture already and just kind of leveraging that. Is there any direct things that you do?
Well, for freshmen coming in and new guys, it's so new to them that naturally they're just so excited about it. The energy that they bring is usually pretty high regardless. Mm-hmm. It's something new. They're in college. They're at LSU. They want to work.
Right.
But really teaching them the intangibles, doing things right, showing up on time, dressing correctly, those things are what the majority of our energy goes into at first. And then once we get on the platforms, it's about technique, teaching them how to do it right, teaching them how to lift correctly with great form before we start adding a bunch of weight. So we really slow cook the new guys, because we have them for 3 to 5 years, so we're not trying to get it all in one day.
Right.
So we really we call slow cook them.
I love it. How do you, whether it's a conversation or the way that you treat them, how do you get your veterans to lead these young people?
Getting them involved, like, for example, I train the defensive backs here. So if I have some of my freshman DBs in that last group and I have a veteran like a John Battle or, last year like a Tre'Davious White, like a Jamal Adams, putting them on the same platform.
Best D-backs in the entire world, by the way.
DBU, hashtag DBU. Getting them on the same platform, it's just getting them in the same proximity, first of all. That's the first step. And then encouraging them to take ownership of their division or their position is another really, really important thing. Empowering the veterans, that's one of the biggest things. Letting them know that this is their team, this is their position group. Trey, Jamal, this is your group, this isn't my team, and that you need to take ownership. And just how the seniors, when you were here as a freshman, brought you up, you need to pay that back to the freshmen coming in. And just verbalizing that and communicating that with them and empowering them, that's really, really big.
Love it. Anything to add to that?
Well, so our guys just signed. So I tell our players when they're here on their recruiting trip, when the recruiting process ends, the building process begins. And with the stroke of that pen on signing day, you become a collegiate player. So we send them a copy of our workout. I email them, I text them, I call them. And so part of that building process begins while they're still high school seniors. And we'll follow them so they receive the Phase 1 program the day after signing day and a DVD. So, we're coaching them on what we want them to do, and it's ironic. Some of the guys that tell me, oh, Coach, everything's great, I'm working out every day, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, when they show up, they're in the worst shape of all of them. So it's usually the ones that don't say a whole lot about it. Yes, Coach, I'm good. Everything is fine. Those are the ones that are actually doing the workout versus the one that are telling me they're doing the workout. So we try to indoctrinate them on the process before they ever get here. And then if they show up and they're not in shape, I tell them this better be the last time that you're ever out of shape again. And if I give you something, I tell you to do it, you need to do it.
Right.
And those guys that come here, if they're already in great shape, those are the ones who contribute early to our program versus, in fact, some of the guys who show up are in the worst possible condition as freshmen, never play because it's a mindset and an attitude versus a way of life.
Right. I notice you guys have a lot of, I don't know really what the right word is, but you have a lot of terms like Freaky Friday, and you have very set warm-ups that you're going to do on certain days. What do those things mean to you guys? Take Freaky Friday, for example. What do they mean?
All right, so Freaky Friday was actually, with Coach Hatch and the way he does segment training. Fridays, or he called it Brutal Friday. And it was his, snatch segment training, clean and jerk segment training. So we started
What do you mean by segment training?
That's where you go up in weight to a 1 RM, and then you would come down and correct your technique. Matt would probably be a better judge of that than myself. But Brutal Friday was heavy snatch, heavy clean and jerk, up to singles or double cleans, single jerks, or double jerks, single cleans, etc. So the Brutal Friday kind of turned into Freaky Friday. But for us, it means, because Friday's at the end of the week, we're going to train them hard before the weekend. And for our red shirt players during the season, because those guys aren't playing in the game and they're doing extra workouts. So we bring our guys in on Friday, and it's heavy snatches, heavy cleans, heavy jerks, heavy squats, heavy bench. And then at the end of the season, the last Friday of our last home game of the season, we have the Freaky Friday World Weightlifting Championships. I mean,
it's like an enormous competition.
Yeah, it's an enormous
so
competition.
Fucking fun.
So so we divide those red shirt players and those guys that aren't playing. We divide them into 3 or 4 teams. We have purple, gold, white, and tigers or black. We divide them into different teams, and then we have a weightlifting meet. And then after the meet, we give awards, tank tops, hoodies, and on the hoodies it says Freaky Friday World Weightlifting Championship. So it's just a way of creating some enthusiasm for our guys to come in here and train.
Right. And I mean, honestly, I say this all the time. That's one thing that you guys are just so incredible at is energizing these guys, right? At 5:30 a.m., you're literally screaming at these guys. And at first, my first impression was, there's no way I can do it. Like, this is absolutely insane. But then you realize you have to do that because these kids they didn't sign up to lift weights.
Right.
They signed up to play ball.
Right.
And you have to find as many ways to get them energized.
Right.
You have to trigger a response.
Right.
Right. And Coach Moffitt says it all the time. You have to calculate an attitude that you want your players to have, and you have to calculate it first. Because if we're not excited about it, then there's no way that they're going to be excited about it. And like you said, they didn't sign a scholarship to lift weights. So we need to calculate that attitude first.
Right. I love it. So I want to hear from both of you on this. Both of you are leaders. So you lead your teams, you lead the teams and the staff, but then you're also followers. You follow Moffitt, and you're following the overall direction of the head football coach. How do those two relationships intertwine, and how do you make it all work?
Well, we kind of touched on this before. So you've got to take our strength and conditioning philosophy and mend it with the head football coach. And that is our responsibility. It's not strength and conditioning versus football. And I talk to a lot of people a lot of times, and they get upset about the football coach wants me to do this or the football coach wants me to do that. He's the boss, and it's his football team. So if he wants us to push marbles across the floor, we're pushing marbles across the floor as best we possibly can. And I try to reiterate that to our staff. We're not here to call plays. We cannot get involved in who's playing what position or who's a starter, who's a non-starter. We treat them all the same. And it's our responsibility to take the head football coach's message and assimilate that into what we're doing, into our strength and conditioning program, so that we put a good product on the field, but we also put a product in the field that carries his base philosophy, that there's going to be a tremendous amount of energy. We're going to finish every drill. We're going to give great effort. We're going to execute. And I think that's important.
Right.
Yeah, so, it's kind of twofold in my position. Obviously, from Coach Moffitt, everything that Coach Moffitt wants to instill in these players, and it's a trickle down from obviously the head coach as well. The way Coach Moffitt wants it, executed, coached, the verbiage we use, the coaching cues, we all have to be on the same page, and that comes from him. And so that translates down to us and then translates down to our players. In terms of being a leader, the biggest thing that I think is to keep learning. There's not a day that I don't come to work that I don't learn something from him. I've been here 7 years now. So as a leader, to continually try to grow and learn is huge. Once you stop that, you stop becoming, the leader that you could be. So it's kind of twofold in my position.
Right.
And I learned from them.
Hell yeah.
That's the good thing about having great young coaches.
They're fired up to learn at all times.
They're fired up to learn, and we sit down as a staff, and this is not my program. And we talk, I say, if there's something that y'all think we need to do, let's talk about it. And let's put it out there. Let's talk about it. If we decide that's how we're going to do it, then we're going to put all of our energy into doing it that way.
Right.
So, and he and Ryan and Ben and all the assistants that we've had have given us a lot.
Right. So, I'm sure y'all have heard this plenty times. Strength coaches bitching about their head coach because they don't vibe with them. They don't, the direction. They don't believe in the direction, or maybe the head coach is giving them too much direction and they don't feel like they need it. I'm wondering, have y'all ever worked with someone, and you don't have to say who it was, but have you ever worked with someone that you really felt like you really disagreed with the way that they wanted things to go in here, or whether it be out there on the field? And if so, what did you do about that? How did you handle that mentally, emotionally?
So we talk about that as a staff. Ultimately, he is the head football coach. And again, if he wants us pushing marbles, we're pushing marbles. And we can talk about it in our offices. There's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes it's good to get it off your chest, and we will. We'll sit and talk about it. But when we come out here on the floor, we're giving our athletes exactly what the head football coach wants us to do. That's the only way there is to do it. And again, that's, we have a responsibility as coaches that we're here for them. They're not here for us. And we have to deliver that message that the head football coach wants, regardless of how we feel about it. And the athletes should know. I don't have to like it. And I tell our guys, again, that when you're the head strength coach at whatever university it is, you can do it any way you want to do it. And I'll tell them, I don't mean that with any disrespect, but it's only fair to the athletes that we teach it one way.
Right.
We can't do it like they did when he was at Wisconsin Whitewater. Wisconsin lacrosse. That's so bad, man. I'm so sorry.
Really disrespectful.
I'm so sorry. But we can't do it like they did it at lacrosse.
We got a lot of Wisconsin Whitewater fans right now pissed off.
Yeah. Well, we got some lacrosse guys.
A lot of lacrosse guys,
too.
one sitting right here.
So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because it's not fair to the athletes to hear different messages.
Right.
You can't
Absolutely. You can't get them to buy in. It's hard enough to get them to buy into one thing.
Exactly.
Much less 6 different things from each different coach.
And if the head coach says it, we're going to do it. And we can't say, well, this is what the head coach wants us to do.
Right.
It's not going to be like that. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it to the very best of our ability.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really just an ego thing, right? You have to be able to put your ego aside and say, the organization hired the coach for a reason. I have a part in the whole system, right? What is something that you guys have changed your mind about in the last couple of years? It could be mental, physical, in anything.
I guess the structure of our program has changed significantly in the past year. I think it was last spring, so a year from this time, we actually went from our traditional 3-day split to a 4-day split, where we're lifting on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, as opposed to lifting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then when the training year is right, or time of the training year, running on Tuesday and Thursday. I think that was a pretty significant change.
Why did y'all make that change?
We sat down, and Coach Moffitt had a vision for what he wanted with that specific team. He thought we needed a little bit more strength. We needed a little bit more time in the weight room. It also divided the training load up a little bit better, so we could accomplish better quality work, without cramming it in on such 3-day short time frame. It also allowed us to do different running prior to and after the lifts. So we thought that for that specific team, it would be best to get in the weight room more and go to that 4-day split. And it's actually really evolved into a really good program, and we're really, really happy with it right now.
I want to hear yours in a second, but off of that, I'm wondering, I think we might have talked about this a little on the first one we did, but you guys are getting Ferraris in here, right? They're already the best in the entire world, and you're just, as Cochran says, you're putting spinners on it, right?
Yeah.
in terms of like volume and intensity, do you think smaller schools, and both of y'all have been at some smaller schools at one point, smaller schools with smaller guys and girls, did they need more volume in their training?
Yeah. So, hypertrophy.
As compared to here.
Well, that was one of the reasons why we changed, was because when Coach Chavis was here, we ran a 4-3, and our defense was set up mainly because of the way the offenses have changed to go in no huddle and running spread. We were recruiting smaller guys across the front and at the linebacker position. So when Coach Aranda came, we switched from a 4-3 to a 3-4. So we were going to have to play with bigger guys up front, and we needed a Mike linebacker that has to be bigger. So I felt like we had to get bigger. And I don't mean this with any disrespect to anyone, we hadn't recruited well on the offensive lineman side of the ball. So our offensive linemen, we were not getting Ferraris. And we were recruiting smaller guys up front. Our front seven on defense were small because of no huddle and spread. So we had to evolve program-wise and recruiting-wise, and we've made a definite change on how we're recruiting guys now. We're recruiting bigger guys up front, we're recruiting better guys up front, and we're recruiting better linebackers as well. So we had to increase the volume, going from 3 days a week to 4 days a week, and within that change the selection of the exercises as well.
Right. So what has changed in the past 2 years for you?
So we've been doing a lot of triphasic training. So without giving any endorsement to Cal Dietz, we've done a lot of triphasic training in the last 2.5 years. Even when we were doing a 3-day program, we were doing some triphasic training. But it's a lot easier when you're going 4 days a week.
Can you explain that for people? Most people still don't know anything about it.
So, he hasn't come out with his second book yet. He keeps teasing everyone about his second book. But the first book is a great read, and it was Ryan. Ryan read the book first, and he kept talking about triphasic training, and we experimented with it. But then I read the book, and I was like, wow. And when I was a player, we did we called them negatives. Did a lot of heavy negatives. So, it's eccentric training is very good. It's a very efficient means of developing strength, and eccentric training is needed. So to explain it, you're either going to do a 1 or 2 week phase of slow eccentrics timed at certain percentages of your 1 RM. And then even some assisted eccentrics, which we would have called negatives back in the old days.
Where you're going over your max?
Well,
right?
No, not a lot of over your max because the rep is going to be higher.
Okay.
But, sets of 5 with anywhere from 75 to 85%. Slow eccentrics for time, depending on the exercises. And for some exercises like split squats with your foot elevated or incline, because the range of motion is a little shorter. Instead of going 5 seconds, we may only do 3 seconds, but it's a slow eccentric, and then with an explosive concentric phase of the lift. Then you follow that with isometrics, where you're going to do pauses either in the squat or on the bench or lunges or on incline or chin ups. So you can use this for any exercise. So it would be a fast eccentric with a pause and then a fast concentric phase. And then we've even branched out doing eccentrics during the season in football positions. So we really branched out, and we did slow eccentrics during the season. We did isometrics in the season. It's really, and it also adds a lot of variety to your training load. So instead of just pressing weights all the time, the players like it. Now, they don't like the slow eccentrics, but they
because of that time under tension.
Time under tension, man, and it's brutal. And when you're done with it, they cheer.
Right.
We were standing at the workout board, and I said, "All right, guys, no more eccentrics this week." Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because once that phase is over, it's tough. And same thing with the isometrics. Although they're not, they don't break down as much, protein, and they don't make you as sore as the eccentrics. They're glad when that phase is over. So then we kind of switch to a Brian Mann type of training where it's a velocity-based training, where now you're trying to move the weights as fast as you can. Right. So we go slow eccentrics, isometrics, and then we go to kind of velocity-based training.
I love it.
Where we're trying to move the weight as fast as we possibly can. It's based on the amount of weight that we put on the bar.
Absolutely.
So that's a couple things that we've done different that the players have really bought into and they like.
Right. And then for those of you who are interested, and I think he talks about it in that book, your connective tissue is trained best through a higher time under tension. But the problem with doing, 10, 12, 15 reps is the wear and tear on the joints. And you have 350-pound guys in here that are just, rep after rep. So that can be a really good way to, decrease the amount of reps, less wear and tear on the joints, and it's also great for your young guys.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits, especially to eccentrics. That time under tension trains the motor pattern a lot better for those young guys that maybe don't have that training experience. And it naturally allows us to train for deceleration without actually going out on the field and running and stopping.
Right.
Which, running is the highest velocity movement you can do, so that's a lot of tax on the body. So we kind of train that effect without actually doing those taxing movements.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefits to eccentrics and pauses.
Hell yeah. So you guys put so much energy into these guys. You're spending time from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 or 3:30 when it's workout days, right? They're in here every hour. Then you have more groups after that, and then in between those and after, you're having conversations about how can we get these guys prepared mentally and physically. When they make mistakes outside of the weight room or even inside, maybe they're disrespectful or whatever, but say they make some kind of mistake, they get arrested or something like that. How do you guys handle that from an emotional, mental standpoint when you're putting so much of yourself into these kids? Yeah,
I mean, we really care about these kids. I think that's why we're all in coaching in the first place, is for the athletes. So, I know naturally for me, if one of my athletes gets in trouble, misses class, misses a tutor, I take it a little bit personal. What could I have done better? So, it's about educating them, first of all, them understanding the importance of doing everything correct. How you do anything is how you do everything, how it translates to the football field, how it translates to life. A lot of these guys have sons, daughters, at a young age, how it translates to being a parent. So, it's also some tough love. If they do something that's, inappropriate, if they're disrespectful, if they get in trouble, there's going to be a consequence for that, and they need to understand that. But the backbone of everything we do, whether it's a punishment run, whether it's sitting them down and talking to them, the backbone of it is it's that we care about them, and we want to see them be successful. So yeah.
I think another thing that really struck me when I was here is that guys would, I've been to several different places, but here guys would come after class just to hang out with y'all, right? And they're literally spending 90 minutes, 2 hours just chatting. What role does that kind of stuff play in this program?
Yeah, so, you want to create an atmosphere that those guys want to be a part of. And that's the best time for us to be able to talk about those other things. It's kind of, I call it the barbershop mentality.
Right.
We want them to be in here. Now, sometimes they'll come and actually get involved, because Matt's on Facebook. I have my Instagram going. They have Snapchat. So they'll come in during a workout group. They'll be passing by. They've either finished a workout, fixing the workout, or been to the training room getting treatment, and they'll come in here with Snapchat. So we'll have to run them out, hey, get out of here. But they'll come in, and hang out, and that's the best time for us to sit down and talk about the off-campus stuff.
Right.
Fortunately, we haven't had a lot of problems with guys getting arrested. You know, our biggest problem, and it's not a huge problem, and it's getting better every week, is class attendance, study hall. You know, and I tell them almost every day, sit in the first 3 rows of class, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's what that allows us to do. And you can tell who likes it and who wants to be in here, who hangs out. And our best leaders are the guys that are usually hanging out in here.
I love it. And I especially love the how you do anything is how you do everything, right? If you're slacking in one area of your life, it's only a matter of time before your willpower is gone and you're slacking in the most important area, which, you know, is sport for most of these kids. Right. So you work with a lot of women and you work with a football team. What are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences in working with women especially, and how have you learned to be more effective with them?
Right. You know, from a training standpoint, you know, the volleyball team actually does a lot of the same movements that the football team does in terms of your basic strength and power movements, your platform movements, your cleans, your jerks, your snatches. You know, obviously with my sport, it's a predominantly overhead sport. So, you know, keeping the shoulders strong and healthy is really paramount. From a mental and emotional standpoint, you know, females naturally come in a little bit more timid, whereas you get the football team in here and you got to kind of break them down and kind of put them in their place first, because you got a lot of egos, you got a lot of testosterone in the same room. With females, they're a lot more reserved, and you kind of got to build them up and build their confidence in the weight room. So that's a really big difference with training them. You know, it's a more group mentality with females. You know, they want to be part of the group. They don't want to be, you know, excluded from anything. Whereas, you know, training the football team, it may be a little bit different. It may not be
They
like that.
They want that praise for themselves.
They want it all for themselves. Where, you know, females are very relationship oriented. So those are the biggest differences I see in terms of how we train. I'd like to, you know, say that they train as hard. You know, I still expect the same energy, enthusiasm, execution, lifting technique, and hard work out of the volleyball team as I do the football players. And I think I owe it to them as Division I athletes to demand that of them. So just small differences in their training, especially with overhead athletes. With females, you got to do a little bit more volume with their upper body. You know, their upper body is about 30% of the strength of a male, whereas your lower body with a female can be up to 70% of what a male's capabilities are. So you got to train a little bit more hypertrophy with the upper body with females, but their lower bodies you can train pretty similar. Obviously, the Q angle is very different on a female, so a jumping sport, you really got to train knee stability, glute activation, and hip strength to try to keep those knees healthy. Other than that, yeah, that's pretty much
in my experience, if you're dedicated to training a woman, like they are easier to coach, right? They buy in fully, and they're more consistent, and they just they follow everything.
Right, absolutely.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, you tell them something once and it's usually corrected.
Right.
So that makes my job a little bit easier.
For sure. I read a book. I was the strength coach of the women's soccer team at SUU, and I read a book by Anson Dorrance, I think his name is, but the UNC best soccer coach of all time, and he said that he noticed that guys like to be praised, and obviously everything we're talking about right now, you know, it's not black and white.
Yeah.
Some guys are a little more feminine,
right.
Some women are a little more masculine, but he said guys like to be praised in front of the whole group, and a lot of times women like to be praised alone, because if you praise them in front of the group, women, sometimes they feel maybe like embarrassed or they're afraid of what their peers are going to think of them, like they just feel jealous.
Yeah, it creates jealousy. Yeah.
What do you think differentiates a great coach from a good coach?
You got to have a passion for what you're doing. So, you know, we're always recruiting and trying to bring in interns. Our program, our best coaches here started out as interns. Eric was an intern, became a grad assistant, became an assistant. Seldom do we ever have to go outside of that system. Mm-hmm. We just hired our newest coach. In fact, the last 2 coaches that we hired were interns. And again, predominantly, all of our assistant coaches began as interns. So we recruit a personality type, and we look for people that were collegiate athletes. And not that you have to be, Eric was a collegiate athlete, not that you have to be a collegiate athlete in order to be a strength coach, but it helps because you know what these people go through.
Right.
And it shows a commitment to sport. But we're also looking for guys that were all-conference players, academic All-Americans, strength and conditioning award winners. Mm-hmm. And Ryan Philo was, their Ironman award winner. So finding guys, Vic Valoria, he was an all-conference football player at SMU. Mm-hmm. So those are the type of people that we're looking for because they're committed to this and they're doing it because they love it. It's not something that they have to do. And I found that guys that were, I guess you could say now, Power 5 conference players that spent a little time in the NFL, mm-hmm. those guys aren't always as good. A lot of those guys play football as a means to an end. Mm-hmm. And there are exceptions on both sides. But a lot of your smaller school players and people from the Midwest, I don't want to stereotype anyone, but we have just found that they're harder workers, they're more committed to strength and conditioning, and they love being a part of a team. If you take a guy from a Division II or Division III school, he was playing football and paying for his way to go to school.
Right.
So it meant more to him to be a member of that team versus a guy that's getting a scholarship and getting paid now $1,500 a month for spending money, and he has aspirations of going on to the NFL. So we look for those type of people, and then we teach them what we want them to do.
Right. I absolutely love the intern process, and that's actually something that we're starting to take at our company, because when you pay people, a good chunk of change right off the bat, you really don't learn what they're made of, right? You don't learn what they're going to do under stress, but if you let them intern with you and earn that spot, right, you really get to know what they're made of. Right. If they're working for free, that's a sign right there. If they can hang on for a few months, you know that they love what they're doing. You have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I went through the process, obviously, and I came from a Division III school up in Wisconsin, a smaller school. So, like Coach Moffitt said, I was playing because I like to play football, mm-hmm. and I was training because I like to train. I didn't have, 10 strength coaches. So it was on me. If I wanted to train, then I had to train. It wasn't on anybody else to push me. So I wish I would have had that. And so that's kind of why I got into this in the first place. Mm-hmm. I wish I would have had that strength coach pushing me. But yeah, I came down here on my own dime. Unbelievable experience. You really learn how to grind. Right. But it's interesting because, and I think Coach Moffitt can probably attest to this, is you kind of work your way up and you find yourself in a position where you're stable and you're a full-time assistant, and you go back and those times where I wasn't making a lot of money and my bank account was really low, those were some of the best times in my career, in my very young career right now. So I wouldn't trade those for anything. That was the best part of my experience down here at LSU right now, is being unpaid and grinding and working and working and working. That was, what kind of made me what I am today.
Right. It makes you feel, I don't know about more like a man, but it makes you that you feel like you're sharpening yourself, right? You feel like you're becoming a better version of yourself because you're being tested, you're being challenged, and you're all in, right? And that's something that you can be proud of.
Right.
I love that.
And I think also, the intern mentality, I think you have to keep that mentality as an assistant though. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing, mm-hmm. And that's the great thing about this staff and how Coach Moffitt organizes it. There's no egos. It's not a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. When we got to clean, we all clean. All the assistants too. When we have to all coach, the interns coach. And so there's not that divide. Mm-hmm. So the mentality to work that you had to have as an intern to get a job in the first place, I think keeping that mentality is what's going to keep you in the field. Right. That's really important to me.
Like, you got to coin that shit, the intern mentality. Keep
Yes.
the intern mentality.
Work.
Yeah, and you're kind of like a starving artist.
Yep.
I spent my first 6 years as a high school coach. I made $13,500. Never got a raise. Had no benefits, no medical insurance, no retirement. But like he said, that's really the best job that I ever had. And, I had 140 some odd athletes that I was responsible for every day. And that's where you develop, your skills as coaching. And you don't ever, and there's no other distractions. You're at work all day and you're coaching. And, to add to something too, we have 2 interns. Well, the last assistant that I hired was in the U.S. Navy. So he was a U.S. Navy guy and an intern. And I have someone now that was in the Army and spent time in Iraq. So those guys have also been really good to us because they understand teamwork and leadership. And that's all part of, everything that we do here.
And you could tell them, hey, I want you here at 3 a.m. and I want everything clean by the time the rest of us get here.
They understand that.
And they're like, shit, thanks for letting me sleep in. What's the biggest mistake that you are willing to share on here in your career as a coach?
Taking for granted that the athletes love it as much as I do. And we've, again, we talk about this stuff all the time. And you kind of mentioned it earlier. They're here to play football. They didn't know that they were going to come here and lift weights 4 days a week and run 4 days a week and have to go to study hall and class all the time. And a lot, not a lot. Some of the guys that we've recruited have been babied their entire sport career. They've been weighted on hand and foot, and then they're dropped right here on campus from all parts of the country and expect to swim on their own. So the biggest mistake that I've made as a coach and continue to make every day, that they love it as much as I do. And they don't see things as black and white as I do. They see things kind of gray. So you really have to make sure that you do a good job of not assuming anything, that you explain exactly how you want it done. And with our off-season running program, we're going through it. I took for granted that they understood the type of stance that we wanted them to be in. And so we videoed it yesterday, and we went upstairs as a football staff, and Coach O put it on, showed us. And our stances were not good. And me took it for granted that they understood what we wanted because we touched on it, but we didn't coach in it. And a great coach said one time, if you're not coaching it that way, then you're just letting it happen. So, we went back over it. We revisited. We met again as a staff out on the football field. We talked about it, and we're going to video today's workout, and we're going to make corrections and continue to get better every day. Our worst day has to be better than everybody else's. And if we can do that every day of the week, every month until the season starts, I think we got a shot.
Hell yeah. So you kind of touched on something about, people are, a lot of these kids that come in here are, they're the best of the best of the best where they grew up, right?
Or told that they're the best of the best.
Exactly. And they get here and they're just one of the bunch, right? And I was listening to a podcast by Carol Dweck. She wrote the book Mindset. And she was talking about how a lot of people, in grad school and med school and stuff like that were the top of their class, when they get challenged, they kind of crumble. Yeah. So I'm wondering, have y'all experienced any of that? And if so, how do you teach them to have more of a growth mindset and teach them that if they put in the work, they will get better?
Yeah, that's an everyday process. And some crumble, some quit. When things get tough, like one of the stations, they'll let go. They'll hyperventilate. We had a guy, one of Eric's guys, we had a problem, big time recruit, mid-year signee. So he started with us in January, and the rest of his classmates are still in high school. And he was hyperventilating just because of the anxiety and, being a part of something that's so great. And it's just a learning process. You have to call him in and say, look, man, just chill.
Right.
You're going to do fine. Everything's going to be okay. And then and then sometimes you got to giddy up and, giddy up. Let's go.
Right.
So it just depends on who the individual is.
Tell me a little bit about what y'all have learned about the GPS systems the last couple of years. So give people a little bit of background. What are they? How do you use them? Or how do they work? And then how do y'all use that information?
Right. So we started with Catapult, and that would have been 5 years now, 5 years ago. And we used the Catapult GPS system for about 4 years. And what it is, it's just a small little device. It's about the size of a credit card, but thicker. And they wear it, and we call it a sports bro. We use them with the football team. So we put them in the bros, and all it does is it sits on the back of their neck, and they wear it. And so what it does, it hooks up to satellites when they're outside. It measures, how far they run, how fast they run, the maximum speed they hit, how many times they accelerate, how many times they decelerate, and the intensity of every acceleration and deceleration. So that unit measured all that, and what it did, it took all those variables and it compiled it into one single number, and we called that our player load. And essentially we just said that's the tax on the body. How hard did they work that day? The new system we use is Polar, and it's administered and it's strapped around their body. The unit's on the left side of their body where their heart's located. It essentially gives us all the information Catapult did, but it also measures physiological factors, your average heart rate, your maximum heart rate, how many times you're in or how long you're in certain heart rate zones, zone 1, zone 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what that system does, it gives me one number on physiological load, essentially what's the tax on all internal factors of the body. And then what I do is I take all their very high accelerations and their very high decelerations, and I add them up to quantify that to one number. And that's what we call our mechanical load. And that's essentially the tax on the muscular system. So now with this system, we can see how hard it is on the muscular system and how hard it is on everything internal, your heart, your lungs, all that stuff, your physiological factors.
Right.
We add those together to give us our total load. So obviously it spits out a lot of information, and we kind of pick and choose what we want to see and what we want to utilize. The main things we look at are the maximum speed they're hit, their mechanical load, their physiological load, and their average heart rate. And I kind of say we use the macros of it. Right. Because we don't want to get, paralysis by analysis with all this information. We just want to look at the main things. But it's been really interesting to see how practices have changed, how training has changed, how guys have gotten faster, how guys have gotten in better shape based on heart rate. It spits out a lot of information that's really, really valuable to us.
And I'm assuming you're looking at the trends, right? Like
Absolutely.
You're not just looking at one practice and saying, okay, we need to change, but you can see, because this is a reliable piece of equipment, I'm guessing, you can see how they're doing over time based on and they're doing the similar type of practice, right?
Right, and it's objective. The unit doesn't matter. It doesn't care what you are. It doesn't, care if you're a running back, wide receiver, defensive back. It's objective, so it is what it is. We track their speed throughout the season. We track their speed in relation to their load, so we can kind of see how those affect each other. Maybe somebody comes in with a really, really high player load of 200, and they reached 20 miles per hour. And the next day they come in with a player load of 300, and they've only reached 19 miles per hour. Well, that guy is probably pretty taxed and maybe overtrained. So there's 1,000 different trends we can track, but we track those main variables throughout the whole season. We graph it. We try to get a good visual on it. I give Coach Moffitt a report every day, and then Coach Moffitt will report to the sport coaches if there's any glaring issues. But yeah, we love to track it and put it in terms and put it in graphs that are really easily read and understood. Because again, the sport coaches upstairs don't necessarily have the handle on it that we have, so we have to be able to articulate that and communicate that with them.
Right. And have they been receptive to that, like changing either practices or anything like that?
So some coaches have and some have not. So when Odell Beckham, for instance, when Odell was here, super competitive guy, we actually had to withhold information from Odell because Odell wanted to have the highest velocity, highest player load, highest yardage. So we had to keep data from him. But I could go to his position coach and say, look, Odell did X, X, X yesterday. We need to really cut back on him if we can. So that worked really well. Some other coaches, they don't want to hear about it. They're old school, et cetera. But, it's a physiological, mechanical load on the body, and it's like poker chips. If you go all in on a bet and you lose, then you've lost an opportunity to be successful. So what we try to tell the coaches is that you got to make smaller bets so that you're able to continue to play the game.
Right.
So each week, we don't want to go all in every day in practice. And Coach Orgeron has been phenomenal with that. And we saw a big difference, and with no disrespect to Coach Miles and the way he ran our team, but we saw a huge drop in overall player load when we had the coaching change. And then, because Eric does a lot of trend lines where I can see trends in those physiological factors.
Right.
And as our player load dropped, our average heart rate drops, our velocities for that particular day and for the week and in the games continue to increase. Oh,
That's phenomenal.
It's glaringly obvious.
And have you noticed any difference whatsoever in your injury rate?
Some of which I can disclose and can't, but there is a big difference in the injury rate. And I think that's going to continue to get better and better as we continue, because everything that we do now is going to be less taxing than it was before because of philosophies. Some coaches listen, some don't. And, it's really common knowledge if you take the time to listen and learn. It's really common. The higher your load, whether you're in weightlifting or track and field or a combined combative sport like football, as you increase load, volume is what fatigues you, not intensity.
Right.
And that's irregardless of what activity you participate in. So you reduce the overall volume, increase the intensity, it's less costly on the organism, and there's a better training effect. And so that's what we've experienced. We've cut the volume, increased the intensity so that we're more sport and position specific, so there's a greater carryover to the game. We're playing our velocity, our average velocity in the games picked up because we were practicing at a higher velocity, and there's less injuries, overuse stuff because we're on the practice field less often.
Right. Are there any other cool things that you guys have gotten in the last couple of years that you're using that you've seen benefit from?
Vibe plates.
Yeah, the vibe plates.
We got the vibe plates.
We talked about that earlier.
Show them that.
There it is.
The vibe plates, they're from vibeplate.com. It's an interesting story. The owner I was
just
talking.
Explain them real quick for audio.
Yeah. So they vibrate at different frequencies. So different frequencies elicit different training responses. So if the frequency's real high, the muscle fibers are going to move at a faster rate than if the frequency is low, the muscle fibers move at a different rate. So depending on what the training response is, you either turn the frequency up or turn the frequency down. And so I go along throughout the day because to players, it feels better for them to have it cranked all the way up. So I have to go through the weight room during the day and turn them down a little bit because they've got them too high. But they're great. They're great for recovery. They're great for warming up prior to activity. They're great for maintaining the neuromuscular responses during work, and they're great for recovery after work. They're great for doing yoga on. They're great for stretching on. So based on the frequency of the knob, it determines the training effect.
All right, I want to wrap it up in a second, but realized that I get and I started doing this a couple months ago. I get the questions all the time. What books do you recommend? What online courses do you recommend for becoming a better strength coach, speed coach, whatever it may be? And what I've started to teach people is, I'll give you all the books you want, right, and more, but I think the best way to learn is like this, and it goes in this order. One is be around people that have the knowledge, the level of knowledge and experience that you want to have. That's the absolute highest form of education, right? Like a mentor.
Right.
Then it might be going to an in-person seminar or something like that. Then it might be a very in-depth course somewhere. And then finally is books and DVDs and all of that kind of shit. And, the person that comes to mind for me is Cody Stout. The kid, he came over here. He came over here from, I think it was Missouri, right?
No, he was the
Indianapolis.
University of Indianapolis.
Yep.
And he would drive all the way here on his spring break, on Christmas break, whatever it may be, just to hang out with us for a couple hours.
Right.
And then he would hit the rounds. He went to Ark State, Ole Miss, etc.
Do Sally up, Sally down.
Exactly.
Knock that out real quick.
Yeah, he did really well. He did maybe not 90 kilos.
60. He did 60 kilos.
Yeah.
On his first try.
Yeah.
Just the blues, huh?
He didn't
Yeah,
do
just the
reds
blues.
like you, but he
Did 60 kilos. His first try, finished it after driving 20 hours.
Yeah. Through the night. Slept in his car.
Slept in his car that night. Got in his car after that and took off to FSU, to Tallahassee, I think.
Yep.
Without resting. And we had other guys, I don't want to call any names, but Philo, I don't think he's done it. He completed it yet.
But he's got to 24 reps multiple times.
Exactly, and quit.
Yeah.
Ooh, I mentioned
Did we
his
say
name.
it? Is this live?
I guess
Is this
maybe
recorded?
we can cut that out. That would fuck with them.
Maybe keep it in.
I don't want any of his players to do that for sure. But okay, so what I'm getting at is in the strength and conditioning world, there's everybody's hungry to learn, and also people they know that they need to network. So what is the best way to go about doing that?
Well, so for an old guy like me who's got kids and a hobby, it's tough to do a lot of traveling. So I go to YouTube. I love YouTube, and I think I've said that before. And books. I try to read as often as I can. Blogs.
Who are your go-tos right now?
Brute strength.
Love it.
And I've looked. I try to find everything that I can find. There's not a lot, but about velocity-based training and Brian Mann, and then listening to other people's interpretations of his training methodology. Same with Cal Dietz and Triphasic training. And Cal will be the first to tell you, and I don't personally know Cal, never spoke to him. I've met him, but never spoke to him. There are other people that he will tell you that have done a better job of Triphasic training than he has, and he's learned more from others doing using his methodologies than he initially did, and he's the one who did the research on it. I'm reading James Smith's book right now on the global load, of philosophy based on training, managing the training load. So I'm always buying other books. But like Cody Stout did, traveling, mentorships, visiting guys like Coach Hatch and spending time and training with Coach Hatch and letting Coach Hatch, the greatest learning experience besides being coached by a great strength coach and great coach, was bringing my athletes to Baton Rouge when I was a high school coach and watching Coach Hatch train my athletes. It's the best learning experience besides doing it myself that I've ever received. And then going back and talking to my athletes about what Coach Hatch had told him to do, and then going to competitions with Coach Hatch and being in the warm-up room and loading the bar with Coach Hatch and, learning how, this is kind of weightlifting specific, but when to start my guy's warm-up and how many attempts prior to my guy going on and lifting before I would have him do his last rep. All of that type of stuff. The only way to learn it is by doing it. And when I started back grad school, when I was at the University of Tennessee, I started going in grad school, and I read over the material and thought I was learning it, and went and took the first test, bombed it. The professor called me in and says, look, man, you got to get serious about this grad school. And I thought I was. I thought I was really studying and learning the material, but I hadn't been to school in, probably 10 years or longer. So I had to relearn how to relearn, or how to learn. And so reading a book is not always the best means of doing it. So going somewhere and actually going through the process yourself, like you said, is by far the best method.
Right. And places like this are very competitive, even to be an intern, like extremely competitive. But the vast majority of organizations, private companies, etc., if you volunteer your time for them, they're gonna accept you, and you can learn from them, right?
Right.
Clean the toilets, scrub the walls, whatever you got to do, just to be in there and watch them coaching. And if you develop a personal relationship, there's just so much that you're gonna learn. So Eric, you're still young. You're still you're working your way up. How do you go about networking and forming relationships with the people you need to?
First and foremost, the best thing you can do is keep your head where your feet are, and do a great job where you're at right now, and not always worry about that next step. But in terms of networking, we go to a lot of conferences, and I know everyone doesn't have the opportunity to do that, but that's great networking to go to, the NSCA, the CSCCA conferences, and just to get around a bunch of strength coaches and meet some new people and branch out. I think those are great opportunities. Social media now is really a good tool in terms of finding, you can go on Instagram and see great training videos from some really, really good coaches. I'm young, but I still wasn't around, or social media wasn't really that big when I was in high school and college. So I don't necessarily reach out to people that way. I understand that that's where it's kind of going now. So that can be a great tool. In terms of books and that kind of stuff, for every hour you read, I feel like you should have 2 hours of real life experience with real life athletes. You can sit in your ivory tower and read a ton of books, but getting out and actually coaching and actually training and having relationships with real athletes that have real life issues, on and off the field or court, I think that's the best learning experience you can have. And I'll bring it full circle to this internship. That's why this internship is so valuable here. That's why it's really good how we run it here, because you're thrown into the fire and you get to apply those things that you learn from the books, that you learn from the seminars, that you learn from the conferences. I think that's how you become a really, really good strength coach. But books right now, Applied Speed Training by James Smith. That's a really, really good book I read. For the beginner strength coach, Science and Practice of Strength Training. That's a basic. That's a really good book. And then, stuff for leadership. Start with Why is a really, really good book. There's tons of good books out there. The Jocko podcast is an awesome podcast. The Brute Strength podcast obviously is number one. But there's so much information out there that you're a fool if you don't take advantage of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've learned is nothing beats making a personal connection and relationship with people.
Absolutely.
And I definitely don't believe, if you meet someone and you don't like them, don't forge a relationship with them. But if you're all in as a coach, then if you meet someone at another school and you really like them, then make it a point to establish a relationship, hang out with them whenever you can. You'll meet up on vacations or whatever like that. I mean, that's when people really stick their neck out for you.
Right.
And that's what makes the whole thing fulfilling, because you get to do what you love to do alongside people you love to do it with.
Right. Absolutely.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked already that you want to tell people about being a better leader, a better coach, etc.?
I think we said most of it. I said it before, being a leader, putting your ego aside and continually growing and looking to grow. You start off knowing nothing. Then you get to the phase where you kind of think you know a lot, and then you dip back down to where you don't know anything again. So I think that's big in terms of relationships with the athletes and being leaders for these athletes. It has to be all encompassing. With these guys, always educating them, always communicating with them, always trying to teach them right from wrong, always trying to teach them to be successful and be champions in everything they do. That's the biggest thing with our guys, and I think that's something that we really try to do here and preach here.
Hell yeah.
I think it's important that as coaches we keep the main thing. We focus on what our responsibility is and do it to the very best of our ability. Tell them, we try to teach them to live their life like a champion, do everything that you can possibly do in order to be successful. And as people, you got to love what you do and try to deliver more than you promise. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that and keep it simple, I think you're going to be successful.
Hell yeah. I love everything that y'all do here. I mean, you lead with the heart, and it shows in the relationships that you create with these guys, and it shows in the in the way that we play football, right? We have one of the most successful programs of all time, and this is a huge part. You guys spend more time with them than any other coaches, and so it's it's a byproduct of it. Thanks for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Good seeing you again.
Thanks, Mike.